In 1880, there was a place deep in the Ozark Mountains where even the wind seemed afraid to pass. Ozark Hollow. The trees grew close together there, their branches twisting like fingers trying to keep something in. Travelers avoided the valley after sundown. They said strange things happened in the dark. Lanterns flickering when no one held them, voices whispering names that no living person remembered. And in the very heart of that hollow, on a patch of dying grass and fog-soaked soil, stood a crooked farmhouse. Its roof sagged, windows shattered, and its door hung by one hinge like a broken jaw. Locals called it the house that spoke in the dead of night. They said if you stood outside it after midnight, you could hear someone weeping from inside, even though no one had lived there for years. One chilly autumn morning, a man named Elias Merrin rode into the hollow on a mule and wagon. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried the weariness of someone who had forgotten how to hope. A carpenter by trade, he had once built grand staircases in St. Louis mansions, but now he was a man escaping something he couldn't repair, his own heart. His wife, Clara, had died of fever the previous winter. Elias had been away working when it happened, miles from home, unable to say goodbye. Since that day, sleep had become his enemy, silence his punishment. When he reached the general store in Ozark Hollow, the sheriff, a stocky man named Tom Grady, recognized him from the telegram he'd sent. "You're the carpenter come to fix that old place?" Grady asked. "That's right," Elias replied. "You sure about that job?" The sheriff leaned closer. "The last man who stayed there left before morning. Swore he heard voices whispering from the walls." Elias gave a tired half-smile. "Walls don't whisper, Sheriff. People just imagine things when they're lonely." He didn't know it yet, but he'd soon learn that loneliness did speak. Elias began his repairs that very afternoon. He cleared out dust, broken glass, and the skeleton of an old rocking chair. The air smelled faintly of smoke, as though the walls themselves remembered a fire. By sunset, he set up his cot by the fireplace and lit a small oil lamp. The flame danced, throwing long shadows across the cracked plaster. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. He told himself the creaking he heard was just wood settling, but as the night deepened, something changed. A soft voice, faint, trembling, drifted through the parlor. "Elias." He froze. His heart thudded in his chest. It was not the wind. The voice was clear, and it had spoken his name. He searched every room, lantern in hand, but found nothing, only the hollow sound of his own boots echoing through emptiness. Yet even after he lay back down, the house seemed to breathe, like it was listening. The next morning, sunlight cut through the mist like a blade. Elias was hammering loose boards when a woman's voice called from the creek below. "Morning, stranger." It was Mrs. Ruth Bennett, the widow who lived on the neighboring farm. She was in her 50s, tall and strong, with streaks of silver in her brown hair and kind eyes that seemed to notice everything. She carried a basket of cornbread and jam. "You'll be needing breakfast if you're planning to wrestle with that house." Elias thanked her and sat on the porch step. As they talked, Ruth's tone grew softer. "Did you hear it?" she asked suddenly. He looked up. "Hear what?" "The house," she said, glancing toward it. "It doesn't just creak. It speaks. Sometimes in the dead of night, I hear it from across the creek, crying, like someone lost." Elias chuckled uneasily. "It's probably just the wind." Ruth's eyes narrowed. "That's what everyone says. But wind don't call people by name." As the days passed, Elias kept working. He found small things buried under the debris: a child's wooden spinning top, a hair ribbon, a half-burnt Bible. One afternoon, while sweeping near the hearth, he noticed something lodged between the stones, an old photograph in a cracked frame. It showed a family, A father, mother, and two children, a boy and a girl. The father's expression was stern, the mother's gentle. On the back, written in fading ink, were the words, "The Howards, 1868." That night, as rain lashed against the windows, Elias placed the photograph on the mantel. Lightning flashed, and for a split second he thought he saw movement in the picture. The children's faces seemed to blur, their smiles melting into something sorrowful. Then the whispering came again. "Please, help us." The next day, Elias went into town to buy nails and lamp oil. At the blacksmith's forge, he asked about the Howards. The chatter around the anvil stopped cold. Old Jed Collins, the blacksmith, looked up slowly. "You don't want to dig into that, son," Elias persisted. "What happened to them?" Jed sighed. "There was a fire. Took the wife and kids one night. The man, Thomas Howard, vanished. Some said he set the fire himself after losing his mind. Others swore the house caught flame on its own. Either way, no one's lived there since." A silence fell over the forge. Finally, Jed added quietly, "Sometimes, at night, people passing by say they see the windows glow orange again, like the fire never ended." That night, Elias couldn't sleep. His dreams were filled with flames, licking walls, smoke choking the air, children screaming. He woke drenched in sweat, gasping for breath. The air smelled faintly of ash. He reached for his lamp, but before he could strike the match, he saw it. A small black handprint on the wall beside his bed. It was no larger than a child's. The edges were smudged with soot. He pressed his fingers against it. Cold. Too cold. Then, somewhere above him, a floorboard creaked. Soft footsteps, like bare feet moving slowly down the hall. He followed the sound up the stairs, his lantern trembling. The footsteps stopped outside the children's bedroom. He pushed the door open. The room was empty, except for a child's wooden top spinning slowly in the center of the floor, though no one had touched it. The next night, Elias tried to ignore the whispers. He focused on fixing the roof until exhaustion pulled him to sleep. Sometime past midnight, the whisper came again, soft, pleading, familiar. "Elias," he froze. The voice was unmistakable. It was Clara's, his late wife. He sat upright, his heart pounding. "Clara, is that you?" "Don't leave them, Eli," the voice murmured. "They're still waiting." He looked around wildly. The room was empty, the lamp flickering. Tears welled in his eyes. How can this be? The wind outside moaned through the cracks, almost like a sigh. And then, silence. Elias buried his face in his hands. For the first time since Clara's death, he allowed himself to cry. The next day, while mending a warped board in the children's room, Elias's hammer struck something hollow. Curious, he pried the plank loose, revealing a small leather-bound book, its cover singed but still legible. It was a diary, written in a woman's hand. The first entries were mundane, notes about weather, chores, and the children's laughter, but as he read further, the tone changed. "Thomas grows angrier each day," one entry read. "He says the house listens to him, that it breathes when he's near. I hear whispers in the walls now. Perhaps it's only the wind, but the children say it speaks their names." The final entry chilled him to his core. "The walls whisper when he's angry. The children cry when he's near. I fear the house has taken his mind. Tonight, if I cannot save them, God forgive me." Elias closed the book with trembling hands. The faint smell of smoke filled the air once more. Elias sat by the cold hearth, the diary open on his knees. The rain outside had turned to a steady rhythm, like the ticking of an unseen clock. He thought about what Martha Howard must have felt, trapped, desperate, terrified for her children. And he thought of himself. How many nights had Clara waited for him, sick and alone, while he buried himself in work? The more he stared at the flames, the more he began to wonder. Maybe the whispers weren't ghosts at all. Maybe they were echoes of guilt, trapped in the timber, soaked into every nail and beam. The house wasn't evil. It was grieving. And in that grief, Elias saw his own reflection, broken, haunted, and longing to be heard. It was near midnight when Elias saw the first flicker. A faint orange glow pulsed through the cracks of the floorboards, like firelight breathing from beneath the house. His heart raced as he grabbed his lantern and followed the glow down the cellar stairs. The air grew colder with each step, damp and heavy with ash. The walls were blackened, not with time, but with soot, like they still remembered the blaze that had ended the Howard family. At the far end of the cellar, Elias spotted something carved into the stone with trembling hands. "Forgive him." The light flared suddenly, and from the shadows emerged a figure, translucent, shifting like candle smoke, a man, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow. Elias dropped his lantern and stumbled back. The ghost spoke in a voice broken with regret. "I never meant for it to happen. God help me. I tried to save them." The ghost stepped forward, his outline flickering as though struggling to remain. "You're Thomas Howard," Elias whispered. The spirit nodded slowly. "Once, before the fire, before my anger became a storm." Elias swallowed hard. "You caused it?" Tears, or something like them, shimmered in the ghost's eyes. "Not by will. The house. It fed on my rage. Every shout, every cruel word. When she tried to leave that night, the walls screamed with me. Then came the fire." Thomas looked toward the ceiling, where faint echoes of children's laughter once lived. "They never left, neither did I. The house remembers our pain. It keeps us here." Elias's throat tightened. "Why show yourself to me?" "Because you're like me," Thomas whispered. "A man carrying ghosts of his own making." Elias sank to his knees. "Then how do I help you? How do I free them?" Thomas looked down, his form flickering. "We are bound by guilt. Forgiveness is the only key, but not from others, from ourselves." Elias's voice broke. "How can a man forgive himself for what he's done?" Thomas smiled sadly. "By first believing he deserves to try." The cellar light dimmed. The ghost began to fade. Elias reached out. "Wait, what do I do now?" Thomas's final words echoed softly. "Begin with yourself, Elias Merrin." Then he was gone. Only the words carved into stone remained. "Forgive him." The next morning, sunlight poured through the cracked windows. Dust floated in the air like tiny ghosts. Elias stood before the cracked mirror in the hallway. His reflection stared back, tired eyes, unshaven face, a man hollowed out by grief. He spoke aloud, voice trembling. "Clara, if you can hear me, I'm sorry. I thought I was building a future for us, but I built walls instead. You deserve better than a man who only came home to rest his bones." The wind sighed through the window frame. For a moment, the air grew warm, gentle, familiar. And then he heard it, soft, tender, unmistakably hers. "You've always been forgiven, Eli." Tears fell freely as Elias whispered, "Thank you." The mirror seemed to shimmer, and for the briefest heartbeat, he saw Clara smiling behind his reflection, not in sorrow, but peace. That night, Elias returned to the cellar. He lit a single candle and placed it on the stone floor. "Thomas," he said softly, "I understand now. It wasn't the fire that trapped you. It was the silence." The air shimmered. The walls seemed to breathe again, and the faint sound of children's laughter echoed faintly through the hall. Elias walked upstairs, his lantern flickering with a strange, gentle glow. For the first time, the house didn't feel cold. It felt alive. He stepped outside into the crisp autumn night. Through the windows, the house glowed faintly orange, not with fire, but with warmth, as though the ghosts within had found a small piece of light. The next morning, Ruth Bennett crossed the creek, her shawl wrapped tight against the chill. "I saw lights in the windows last night," she said breathlessly, like the house was alive again. Elias told her everything: the diary, the ghost, the forgiveness. When he finished, Ruth's eyes brimmed with tears. "My brother's name was Thomas Howard," she said quietly. Elias froze. "I was just a girl when it happened," she continued. "Mama and I moved away after the fire. I always believed there was good in him. Folks in town said he went mad, but I knew he loved his family. He just didn't know how to show it." She looked toward the house, trembling. "If you saw him, if he spoke, maybe his soul can rest now." Elias nodded slowly. "He wasn't evil, Ruth, just broken, like me." That evening, Ruth returned holding a small envelope, yellowed and delicate. "It was found at the post office years ago," she said. "Addressed to Clara Merrin, never delivered. I think it was meant for you." Elias's hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a letter written in Clara's familiar handwriting. "My dearest Eli, if this finds you, know that I never blamed you for being away. You worked so hard for us, even when your heart was tired. But please, promise me one thing. Don't let grief silence you. Listen, even when the world is quiet, sometimes love speaks through walls." As he read the final line, tears blurred his vision. He looked up at the house, whispering, "I'm listening now, Clara." That night, Elias stood in the parlor with the diary in one hand and Clara's letter in the other. The house was silent, waiting. He spoke softly, voice steady. "To the Howards, you're forgiven. To Thomas, may peace find you. And to Clara, I forgive myself." A sudden wind swept through the house, strong but warm. The candle flames flickered wildly, and the walls groaned, not with pain, but relief. From upstairs came the faint sound of children's laughter, followed by a woman's gentle hum, like a lullaby carried on the breeze. Then, slowly, the sounds faded. The air grew still. For the first time in decades, the Hollow house was silent. Days passed, the air around. The hollow grew lighter. Even the birds returned, nesting in the eaves of the roof. Elias stayed on to finish his repairs. He mended windows, polished the old floors, and scrubbed away years of soot. When the final board was nailed and the last crack sealed, he stood back and smiled. The house no longer looked haunted. It looked healed. Ruth brought flowers from her garden and placed them by the hearth. "Maybe it just needed someone to listen," she said softly. Elias nodded. "Don't we all?" Together, they sat by the fire as the evening sun poured through the windows, warm, golden, and alive. Years later, travelers passing through Ozark Hollow often spoke of a peculiar thing: a farmhouse nestled between trees that seemed to glow softly at dusk, as though it held the warmth of unseen hands. Locals said if you stayed the night and listened closely, you might hear laughter, faint, distant, but happy. They said the house no longer spoke in sorrow, it whispered peace. Inside, above the mantel, hung a new photograph: Elias Merrin standing beside Ruth Bennett, both smiling proudly in front of the restored home. Beneath it, carved into the wood, were three simple words: "Forgiveness lives here." And from that day on, people in the valley no longer feared the hollow. They called it the listening house, where even the echoes of the past could find rest, because one man, broken but willing, had chosen to listen.